Okay, also 2.5. So this homework, like I said, is finding the slope of a line. So technically the slope of a line, when we're looking at the line, when we're talking about the slope is what I would say would be a measure of the slantness of the line. So it's a measure of the slantness of a line. Now, some things we know about the slope. If the slope is positive, so a positive slope, and you always read your lines from left to right on the graph, okay? So going left to right, a positive slope goes uphill. So if a positive slope goes uphill left to right, it's going to sort of rise as it goes to the right. A negative slope would go downhill left to right. So going downhill left to right. So automatically would know if I looked at a graph with an uphill line that slope has to be positive. And if one's going downhill, that slope has to be negative. Now there's two other slopes. There's what we call a zero slope. So a zero slope looks like a horizontal line. So zero slope is going to go straight across. And that's basically when you're walking on a floor, the floor we say has a zero slope, okay, because it's horizontal. And y'all, the last type of slope is what we call undefined slope. And the way we would get an undefined slope is if we had a vertical line. Remember, a vertical line goes straight up and down. So since the vertical line does not move right as it's going up, this is undefined. And the way you would get an undefined slope, I'll show you later when we start looking at the slope formula, okay? So I'm going to sort of draw what I mean by the slope. And I'm going to make my graph sort of small. I'm just going to make it go out about 5, okay? All right, letting one in real quick. All right, then I'll go 5 up, 5 down, and then 5 left. So say my graph started in the center. I had a point in the center. And then let's say over here at 3, 4, I had another point. So this point here was 0, 0. This point here was 3, 4. And then my line's going to go straight through this. So basically, when I look at this graph, the slope is a measure of how much the graph rises divided by how much it runs or goes in the X direction. So the slope is basically what we call a rise over the run. How much does it go up and how much does it go over? So if I was looking at this graph here, and this is uphill line, so that means my slope has to be positive. So y'all, here comes our slope formula to figure out the rise over the run. To get the rise, we take our y value of the second point minus the y value of our first point. Then we divide by the x value of the second point minus the x value of the first point. Now, if the x1 and x2 are equal, like a vertical line, that's how you get the undefined slopes, okay? And if the top numbers are the same, that's how we would get the horizontal lines that would give me a zero slope. So let's play with this one. The 0, 0 point, my first point, I'm going to let that be x1 and y1. That second point up here, this will be x2 and y2. So I'm labeling my points. So if I wanted to find the slope of this line using those points, I'm going to come in here. Y2 is 4. So we would have 4 minus my y1 was 0. Then I would divide that by my x2, which is 3, minus my x1, which was 0. All right, y'all. So on top, 4 minus 0 is 4. 3 minus 0 gives me 3. So this slope of 4/3 tells me that this graph goes up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes right 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, if I wanted another point on the line, say I was wanting to go further on my line, I could go up 4 again, 3 over, and I'm still on that line. As long as I go up 4 and over 3, I will stay on that line forever. So y'all, this is how you would find the slope using the 2 points of a graph. Now, the second way we'll find slope is what we call the slope intercept form of a line. All right, y'all. So the slope intercept form of a line comes in this form: y equals m times x plus my b. The m right here, m is the slope. So if I got a line solved for the y, whatever number's in front of my x, that's going to be the slope of my line. Now this little b at the end, the number at the end, that's what we call the y-intercept. And remember, the y-intercept is where the line crosses over this the line crosses over the y-axis, okay? So what they'll do, they're going to give us some equations. They're wanting us to figure out what the slope is. And then they want to know what the y-intercept is. Now remember, the y-intercept has to be in form of a b, comma, 0. The y-intercept has to be a point. So whatever b is, whoops, I'm backwards, y'all, my bad. 0, b. All right, let me pull that down. So the y-intercept is in the form of 0b. 0 for the x value, because remember, if you're on the y-axis, your x value was 0 right in the center. And then the b would be the point on that y-axis where it's crossing over. All right, letting one in real quick. So y'all, let's play with some of these. So we're going to go to problems on the homework, and they're going to start out with the slope intercept form. So let me share that page. All right, y'all. So y'all should be seeing my problem 1. So problem one, they say find the slope and the y-intercept. So remember, the slope is the number in front of the x. So on this problem, my slope would be 2. Now I would check that. Then they say, what is the y-intercept? Now notice, they're giving us the 0 already. So all we got to do is put in the number. So in the blank, I would put in 4. So although the y-intercept is 4, you got to write it as an ordered pair and put that 0 first. So y'all, you would check that. So I'm going to let y'all answer this one. So now that f of x, remember, the f of x is the same thing as a y. They're just giving this one in function notation. So y'all, the first question is, what is the slope of this line? And let me pull my chat up for you. All right, y'all, so the slope of this line is? Oh, I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing a -9. Good job. Because remember, the -9 is in front of the x. So the slope is going to be -9. You're going to check that. Then I want to know, what is the y-intercept? So the y-intercept is going to be 0, what? Oh, now watch out. Just saying, you got to do one thing to that 10. Make that a -10. There you go. So remember, if it's being subtracted, we treat that like a -10, okay? All right, y'all, let's see what's next for y'all. All right, y'all. So the slope of this line would be what? All right, so I'm going to go with that -5/4. All right, good job on that. And then my y-intercept would be 0, -4/5. Good job. So basically, y'all, these are looking just like they are in that form, okay? Now, here's what we do to mess you up. So let me write this one down, y'all. So this is what, number 4? We have 7x minus 9y equals 20. And then they're going to want the slope and y-intercept. So the trick on this one, the trick on this problem is we need to solve it for the y. Once we solve it for the y, we'll have it in this form like we need it. We need the y equals mx plus b, okay? So to solve this for the y, we got to move the 7x. So since the 7x is positive over here, we're going to subtract 7x from both sides. Now, what that's going to do, these 7x's cancel. I got a -9y. Now, if I want it to look like the y equals mx plus b, I'm going to put my x's first and then the number. Because remember, you cannot add these together because they're not like terms. So we're going to put the x first, -7x. The 20 was positive, so that's going to become a positive 20. All right, now, -9y needs to be a 1y. So then we're going to come in and divide everybody by -9. All right, so what that's going to do, -9 divided by -9 makes that a 1y right there. 7, I can't divide by 9, but those two negatives are going to cancel. Remember, like signs when you divide becomes a positive 7/9x. Right here, you got a plus 20 divided by -9. That's unlike signs, so that's going to make that a minus. And then 20 divided by 9, we cannot do with, so we'll leave that a 20/9. And y'all, the thing you got to realize on these, when you see subtraction, that's like plus a negative, okay? So if you change the subtraction and thought about it as addition, you would treat it as a plus minus 20, okay? But we write subtraction because it's easier. So we got our numbers. So the first question we're going to put in, what is my slope of this line? And let's see, we got it in order now. So in front of my x is the 7/9. So there you go. Slope will be 7/9. And then our y-intercept will be the negative 20/9. Good job. So y'all, you would go put those into the math lab. So y'all told me this was 7/9. 7 divided by 9. And then y'all told me this was what? 0 and a negative 20 divided by the 9. All right, so let's see. So let's try this one again. We got a number 5, which is a 3x equals 7y plus 35. So notice they're trying to be a little tricky here. They're putting the x's over here and the y's over here in the number. But y'all, it don't matter what side the y ends up on, as long as the y ends up on one side and the numbers and the variables x end up on the other side. Because we can rearrange it later. So the first thing we want to do is get our 7y by itself. So we need to move that 35. So y'all's move on that would be what? Oh, let me let one in real quick. So y'all, you could move that 7, but that's going to give you a lot of work because you would have to move the 7 over, then move the 3 x's to the other side. So let me show you a trick. I'm actually going to subtract that 35. Because watch this. Subtract 35 from both sides. These are not like terms, so that's going to stay 3x minus 35. That's going to equal that 7y because that stuff cancels. Now, I'm focusing on my y still. I'm going to divide by 7. Good job. So 3 divided by 7x minus 35 divided by 7 will equal my 7y divided by 7. So we really can't do nothing with that 3/7 x. So we're going to leave that as a 3/7 x minus 35 divided by 7, y'all. That's going to give me what, about a 5? And then over here, the 7's cancel, making that a 1y. But remember, 3/7 x minus 5 equals y. That's the same thing as y equals 3/7 x minus 5. So it don't matter what side I solve my y on. I can always rearrange it once I'm done. So y'all, there we got our slope is going to be the 3/7. Our y-intercept will be the 0, -5. So they're going to hit you on your number 4 and 5 about solving those for the y, okay? All right, so let's punch that in. So we got a 3 divided by 7 for our slope. And then we got a 0, comma, what do we get? -5 for our y-intercept. Okay, also, let me move my little chat out of the way a second. So look at this. I'm going to make this larger for you. So if you notice, this one's going to use the slope formula. So for number 6 here, I mean, this is what, number 7. So for our number 7, I'm looking at that graph. In the point on the left side toward the top, I want that point first. So if you notice, that one's on the y-axis. So that first point is going to be 0 for the x, and then 6 for our y. So y'all with me? I started at 0 for my x's, went straight up, and the first blue dot was at 6 on the y-axis. Now the second point goes right 1, and then it looks like the y value is a -6. So that point is 1, -6. So I had to figure out my 2 points first before I could use my formula. Now y'all see that line is going downhill from the left to the right. So since that line is going downhill, what sign should my slope be when I'm done? Do y'all remember what we said on that? So it should be negative. Good job. So it's going to be negative because this thing's going to go downhill is what we was looking for on that one. Positive slopes go uphill left to right. Negative slopes go downhill left to right. So y'all, here's my points. I'm going to let this be x1 and y1. This will be x2 and y2. And I'm going to use the slope formula, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm just going to plug in for these y's and x's and then see what I get. So y2 is -6. So I got -6 minus my y1, which is a +6, over my x2. Well, my x2 is 1 minus my x1, which was 0. All right, y'all, so let's see what we get. -6 minus 6 is a -12 on top. The bottom, 1 minus 0 is 1. Now, I can simplify this on down. -12 divided by 1 would give me a -12. But y'all remember this. The slope is always represented as a fraction. So if there's not a number on bottom of that slope, we're always going to treat it as a 1. Okay? So if there's not a number on the bottom, it's always a 1. That graph has to move to the right at least 1 unit, okay? So now, let's go look at this graph and see what we got. We got a -12 for the slope. And y'all watch this. Since I got a -12 over 1 for my slope, if I start from 6 and count down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I go right 1. I am exactly on that line. So another way you could have counted the slope was, since you started at 6 and had to go down to get to that -6, that's telling me my slope is negative. And then I went right 1, and there I got my -12. Is that making sense? All righty, y'all. So let's see. We're going to check that one. Oh, I guess that was 6 I just did. Okay, so now this will be 7. So that one was 6. Okay. All righty, so let me zoom this in so we can get these points. All righty, y'all. So tell me the coordinates of my first point. So I'm looking at that point that's on that y-axis. So the left point on those 2 dots. So let me see here. That looks like my x value is what, 0? Well, I think it's actually at 0. Looks like 0 and 6 for that one. Yeah, it's hard to tell on these graphs. They make them so small. Now, the second point on the line. Yep, so you got 0, 6, and then that second point, that looks like 1 for the x. So the second point has what, a 1 value for the x, and looks like that's in between. So that looks like a 1, 7 for that point. So you got your 2 points. So now it's just time to use that slope formula. Now remember, this one was going downhill, so it was negative. This line is actually going uphill. And remember, when it's going uphill, it's going to be a positive slope when you're ready. So here you go. X1, Y1, X2, Y2. We're going to plug that in our formula. Y2 is 7. Minus our Y1 is 6. Divided by X2, which is 1. Minus X1, which is 0. All right, y'all. Top 7 minus 6 is 1. On the bottom, 1 minus 1 is 1. So my slope simplifies down to a 1. But remember, we always move like it's a fraction. So this is telling me that to go from one point to the next, I got to go up 1 in the y direction and right 1 in the x direction. Remember, rise over run. So let's go look at that. And y'all, if you look at the graph, if you start on the left point and you go up 1 and right 1, you are on that second point. We ended up with a positive 1, which is what we needed, a positive number. So then we would check that, and we're moving on. Now notice number 8, they're actually giving us the points. They're giving us a 4, 2 and a 10, 7. So we would go work that out and come back and put our slope in. All right, so I would make this x1, y1, and then x2, y2. I just sort of put my x1, y1 in order on my points. All right, so here we go. Y2 is 7 minus my Y1 is 2. That's going to be over my X2, which is 10, minus my X1, which is 4. So y'all, if I start simplifying, 7 minus 2 on top is going to give us a 5. 10 minus 4 gives me a 6 on the bottom. So this is telling me that this line is positive. So it's going to go up 5 units. And then it's going to go right 6 units. Once I go right 6 units, I'm at the second point on my line. And that's all this slope's telling us. Up 5 and right 6. Okay, so I just want y'all to sort of realize what's happening with these lines to go from point to point. All right, y'all, so let's go put that in. We had a 5 divided by 6. All right, y'all, 9, they're giving me the point 8, negative 3, and a point 3, negative 8. So we're going to play with that one. And so once again, come in and put X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Plug them into your formula. So Y2 is negative 8 minus my Y1 is a negative 3. So I'm going to put that negative 3 in parentheses so I don't get it mixed up with this minus, okay? Divided by X2, which is 3, minus X1, which is 8. So the biggest mistake I get on this is when people put in this negative 3, they forget about this minus that's in the problem, and that messes up their signs, okay? So if you got a negative number for X1 or Y1, you're going to end up with a double negative. So remember, negative 8 minus a negative 3, that's like negative 8 plus 3. 2 negatives will make a positive. So let's see what we get. Negative 8 plus 3 on the top will give me a negative 5. 3 minus 8 on the bottom gives me a negative 5. And y'all guess what? Negative 5 divided by negative 5 actually gives me a slope of 1. So I would treat this like 1 over 1. And I'll show you how these two negatives make that happen. So say I've got a point here. Watch this. If I go down 5, I'm going to go down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this is negative for the x's. So that would go left 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That thing would be like that. But watch this. If 2 negatives make a positive, doesn't 2 positives make a positive? So if these was a positive 5 over a positive 5, this would go up 5 and then right 5. But guess what? I'm still on the same little line coming up through there. So although it's 2 negatives over here, that will make a positive slope, and it will go uphill, left to right. So down and left is the same thing as up and right, okay? So y'all guess what? We ended up with a slope of 1 on that. So we would go put that in. All right, now watch this one, y'all. This one's going to be trickier. I'll probably have to break out a calculator on this. I got a negative 8.8, comma, 4.1. And my second point is going to be negative 8.3 and 3.3. So for this one, they're just hitting us with some decimals. So I'm going to come in and do x1 and y1, x2, y2. And then we're going to plug them into our formula. Y2 is 3.3 minus y1, which is 4.1, divided by x2, which is negative 8.3, minus x1, which is a negative 8.8. So y'all notice I'm subtracting a negative, so I got the double negatives again. All right, so I'm going to ask my calculator, what is a 3.3 minus 4.1? So 3.3 minus, what do we say, 4.1. I hit enter. We're getting a negative 0.8. So the top is a negative 0.8. Now remember on the bottom, I had negative 8.3 minus a negative 8.8. I'm going to make that a positive 8.8. So I got negative 8.3 plus 8.8. Now you could do minus a negative 8.8 if you don't turn it into a plus. It'll still give us the same answer. So y'all let me see. So notice, watch this. If you didn't change it and you did negative 8.3 minus a negative 8.8, watch, the calculator knows to make that a plus, and we still get our 0.5. So on the bottom, we get a 0.5. All righty, so let me get back to my screen. Now notice, this answer says type an integer or fraction. So what we got to do, I'm going to go to the calculator. So integer means like a whole number, and then fraction, y'all know what that is. So to get this to be a fraction, I'm going to go to that calculator, and I'm going to see what I get. I'm going to do negative 0.8 divided by 0.5. Punch that in on your calculator, hit enter. That's going to give you a negative 1.6. So to turn that negative 1.6 into a fraction, under the green button, there's a math button. Hit the math button. And the very first thing says it's got an arrow pointing to fraction. That means it'll turn our answer into a fraction. So I can hit enter and then enter again, so that I get a negative 8/5. Now y'all watch this. So say I wanted to start where I had the negative 0.8 over 0.5. Watch what can happen. If I hit the alpha y equals button and see that ND number 1 is highlighted, if I hit enter, that makes it look like a fraction. So I'm going to put in my negative 0.8 on the top. And this is just another way to do this. And on the bottom, I had a 0.5. So if I didn't want to divide this, then turn it into a fraction, I can put it in as a fraction. And when I hit enter, I get the negative 1.6. And then I go back to math and enter twice. And I get that negative 8/5. So y'all, either way, you can turn it to the negative 1.6 first, then to a fraction. You can put it in as the fraction like that, get to the negative 1.6 and turn that back into the fraction. But we need to put in A, negative 8 over 5. So y'all, here we go. So negative 8 divided by 5. So it's now fraction form. So y'all look at this little picture they're giving me. Now, they're not giving me points on this. They're just telling me at this one end, this goes up 0.9 feet. Then they're saying the run or the horizontal part is about 5 feet. So starting with 0.9 for the rise, 5 feet for the run. Now notice, they want the grade listed as a percent. So let me work this problem first. So remember, our M is going to be our rise. Well, the rise is the 0.9. So we would put 0.9 divided by the run, which is 5. So y'all, let's see what that equals. We're going to go to the calculator. And I'm going to do 0.9. So this time they're not giving us any points. They're just telling us that that's what that side would equal. And then we're going to divide that by the 5. So 5 would be the distance between the x's, okay? Now watch this. You're going to hit enter on this. You're going to get a 0.18. 0.18 is the decimal form. So can y'all tell me how I would turn a decimal into a percent? Y'all remember that trick about if I want to turn a decimal into a percent, I move the decimal right 2 units and add the percent. So if I move this decimal from in front of the 1 2 units, I get a 18. And then I put my percent. Is that ringing bells? Or basically, you're multiplying by 100. When you move the decimal twice, you're basically multiplying by 100. So if you did that on the calculator, once you got that 0.8, if you'll take that answer and multiply by 100 and hit enter, you'll get that 18%, okay? So they want these as percent, and look at this answer blank. So see, they got that percent there. So all you would do is put 18. So that would be the slope of that little treadmill. So if you ever wanted to figure out what slope you're running or walking, figure out how high your treadmill is off the ground on the front, and then measure the length of that. And that'll tell you what sort of slope you're walking on, okay? All right, y'all, look at that. The last problem you're going to have to do. And it says find the slope or the pitch of a roof. And this is how to figure out the pitch of your roof. So notice on the left side, the rise is a 0.7. The run is 11.3. So notice they want this in percent again. So when we solve it, we got to move that decimal right twice. And notice what this one says. Round to the nearest percent as needed. So that means no decimals, okay? They want it rounded to the nearest percent, so they don't want decimals at all. So M was going to equal my rise over my run again. Well, they gave me the rise. They said that was 0.7 over the run, which is 11.3. So y'all want to go figure this out on my calculator. So notice, now notice these ones you don't have to turn into fractions because it's not telling us to turn this stuff into fractions, okay? All right, so calculator time. So I had 0.7 on top, divided by my bottom, which was 11.3. So once I hit enter, I'll have my pitch or my slope of the roof as a decimal, 0.619, blah, blah, blah. Multiply this by 100 to get it into percent. And watch this. When you multiply by 100, it's going to move that decimal from in front of the 0.06 and put it after the 6. So it's after the 6 now, 6.19. So round that 6. Am I going to keep that a 6 or would you round that to a 7? Keep the 6. Good job. So we're going to keep that 6. So we're going to go back to MATLAB. So round to the nearest decimal, put in your 6, and y'all be done with it. Y'all, so I'm going to stop my share now. So that's the world of the slope of a line. Remember, slope is just the rise over the run. Okay? Positive slopes are uphill. Negative slopes are downhill. A zero slope would be a horizontal line, which they're not bugging you with on the homework yet. And then a vertical line would have the undefined slope. Okay? So the question, do y'all have any questions over this work? So y'all, it's not too bad. I wanted to give y'all a nice little easy homework before y'all hit the weekend. Remember, if you haven't done test 1, it's due by Sunday night, okay? And then we'll pick up with the next section come Tuesday. All right, y'all, so let me see. I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to stop my recording.